So we're here in Milwaukee for the US Open, but you had two races in the past, what, like 8 days, 9 days?
2 races in 7 days.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're going to start off by talking about Oregon.
Yeah.
'Cause that was the first one.
Seems like very long ago.
Yeah. So how was your training going into Oregon?
Training going into Oregon was like, it was okay. That was like July 23rd. Sophie and I had just driven across the country like 2 weeks prior. So it was like, not the, like, I just wasn't feeling great because like I went to Boulder for like 3 weeks to try to do that race. And then I went to Mont Tremblant. I dropped out of Boulder because I was sick. I went to Tremblant. I got canceled. And then I went back to Florida to like move out of my apartment, pack her car, do all that. And that was just like a lot of like missed training days and just a lot of like mental energy and stress trying to like move out of my apartment and drive 2,500 miles. So it was okay. I had 2 really good weeks back in Tucson. Like, it felt really good to be back there and get some quality training in. But then going into Oregon, like, I felt a little flat. But as you can see from like the results, like, I felt better at Maine because it just kind of like warmed things back up.
Yeah. So it was obviously downriver in
Yeah.
Oregon, and you came out of the swim like 15-ish seconds behind Lionel.
Yeah.
And then both of you guys pushed really hard on the bike.
Yeah.
How did that bike feel, and then how did it feel on the run after?
Yeah, it was a quick swim, or I mean, hindsight, if we did this after, Maine's actually faster, which is like crazy. But it was solid. I felt good in the water. Came out 15 seconds behind Lionel, bridged the gap in transition because it was a really long transition. So I like sprinted through there. Ended up catching up to him, literally passed him like in the first mile of the bike, and not necessarily to pass him, but because there was a train of people, I had to get around, and he was the last person, so I had to pass him or whatever. And then was ahead of him for like this little technical spot, and then he passed me, and then I was like staying like 13-ish meters behind him or whatever, like literally 1 or 2 meters behind the legal distance. And some person, like, like, he's obviously in the race, but like wasn't involved in like the front of the race, like slots in like right in front of me, and then another guy slots in right in front of me, and I throw my hands in the air, and the ref comes over, and so I have to like literally hit my brakes and move like 20 meters back because two people had just like slotted in front of me. And then I pass them, never see them again, but whatever, I'm not gonna say their names. And so then I have to pass them, and then Lionel stays like, and that whole time that I had to drop back and then pass those two people, Lionel got like 20 seconds up the road, 30 seconds up the road. And for the next 53 miles, he stayed 30 seconds ahead of me, like the whole time. So that was like really aggravating because not that it would have really made much of a difference, right? And maybe I could have like sat behind him legally if I would have bridged the gap, but literally after that one moment, I sat 30 seconds behind him all day. And yeah, so yeah, ended up biking really hard. I was really happy with the bike. I mean, anytime I can, bike pretty much even with him, it's great. And then got on the run and I was just kind of felt tight, sluggish, didn't feel great. And honestly just tried to get at the finish line and secure the podium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're what, like, you were like 4 seconds behind Martin with like a couple miles left.
Yeah, then I ended up passing him with like 2 miles to go. Like 11 miles I passed him, or like caught up to him, and I was running in front of him, and then we came to like the 12-mile mark, and he like made a move at like 6-minute pace because we're like dead. And I was just like freaking jogging, and I just had nothing. I not to make excuses, but like I didn't have like the best laces in my shoes, so my shoes were like super loose for like the whole 13 miles. And so my legs were like so sore because my feet were literally like sliding around the whole time. And it's my fault. I didn't like tie them tight enough or whatever. And then ended up just like looking back, saw Mark Dubrick back there. Figured I had to put in a little move because I was like, dude, I really don't feel like getting caught right now, but it was good. I ended up getting third, so I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And then, obviously, 7 days later, racing Maine. How were you recovering while traveling and everything?
Yeah.
How did you prepare for that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a lot, right? It's Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine, so like literally one coast to one coast, and yeah, I just woke up like really early Monday morning, caught a 4 hour 40-minute flight from PDX to ATL, 2 hour layover in Atlanta, 3 hour flight from Atlanta to like Portland, Maine, and then a 40-minute taxi to like the race. I got in at like midnight East Coast time, and then went to bed. So that was really a long day. I didn't do anything that day. I was just so tired from the travel, and honestly, that whole week it was kind of hard to sleep because I was like, Arizona's on West Coast time, Oregon's West Coast time, so like I was going to bed at like 1 a.m. or like midnight. That's like only 9 or 10 in Arizona, so like that was kind of hard to finally get on the routine. But honestly, it was a great place to train. I had a really good pool, really good biking out there. Weather was good for some running, so honestly got in a pretty good week of training. And yeah, I ended up getting to race day feeling great. So
Yeah. And then you had a pretty similar, I'd say, like first two like legs to Oregon with like a fast downriver swim and then really hard bike.
yeah.
And then, so how did that bike feel? Because that was, I mean, you had what, 4 or 5 minutes on the second fastest bike of the day.
Yeah, that bike was really hard in Augusta. Like, I personally like biked really hard, but that was a really hard bike course. Like the hardest I've ever done. It's harder than St. George. Yeah, it was just a lot of climbing. We're not even climbing a lot of hills. Like you just had to be out of the saddle or on the hoods, climbing downhill. Like there wasn't a lot of, like the first 10 miles you could TT, but then everything else was like very rolling. But I mean, it was a great course. I mean, I personally like hilly bike courses because it breaks up the peloton or whatever. But I pushed like 20 watts more in Maine than I did in Oregon, which means I must have been going pretty hard because I was biking pretty hard. So, but the goal basically was like to bike as hard as I could so that I could do as little work on the run as possible. Like knowing that I'm having to race Milwaukee in 4 or 5 days time after the race. So basically just throttled that bike, caught up to the front of the race, like mile 28 or 20, like an hour in, and put in a big move to drop Barnaby and Sharp, dropped them, and then just kind of tempo, like not tempo, but like, yeah, tempo watch, like lower threshold watch, like all the way to the finish. Ended up here and I had like a 3-minute gap. So I ran like pretty hard first 10K, like 5:15-ish pace through 10K. So it was the first time like since last year that I actually felt good on the run. I've ran terribly all year, and not even from like a fitness standpoint. Like, well, probably because I'm like incredibly overbiking, but yeah. So it was felt good to like bike. Probably that was the hardest I've ever biked, and then I felt completely fine on the run. It was just like one of those lucky days, I guess, where everything just feels so easy. So yeah, I got through 10K. Heard I was like 5.5 minutes ahead, and then just put in cruise control and crossed the line. It was 3:33. Not that time matters at all, but yeah, it was a fast day. So
Yeah. So you said you were kind of saving something the second half of the run for Friday.
Yeah. I mean, because I mean, maybe we'll find out Friday night when I race, but I think if you can kind of like jog a little bit, you know, the second half of the run, or especially like the last 5K, you can save yourself pretty good, you know, because like I feel like a lot of the damage is done like the second half of the run if you're really having to push. So I really just kind of try to lower the heart rate, fuel really well, and then finish instantly. Had like a Gatorade, Coke, did like a 15-minute cool down jog to flush everything out, and then just packed and then straight here. So yeah, just like trying to conserve as much energy as possible as you can, knowing I have like one of the biggest races of the year, Friday night.
Yeah. So if Lionel was racing at Maine, how do you think you would have stacked up with him there?
Oh, with the boss, man, I don't even know. I mean, I know how I felt in Oregon, and I know how I felt in Maine, and I obviously felt way better in Maine, executed way better. But I think he could say the same thing, so I don't know. He probably would have kicked my ass. So
Was Maine your best race in triathlon yet?
I think so, probably, yeah. Like St. George was probably that placeholder. Because again, I felt great there. Had a pretty good swim, really good bike, okay run. But this time I was able to like put it together on the run, right? Like I ran terribly in St. George, felt like garbage, and I ran like yeah. So and then here I felt great, right? So like from a energy standpoint, from like my own personal feeling, my own personal numbers, like yeah, this is like definitely my best race yet for sure.
Nice. And then, have you been getting a decent amount of support from the crowd these past 2 races? More people starting to know your name, or?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a lot more people like cheering me on. Even a lot of like the guy competitors were saying good job and stuff. So that was super cool. I feel like it's a pretty good community across the guys, like in the peloton or whatever in the competition. So yeah, it's been good to like meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of people. It's been a lot of fun. So definitely makes the race much more enjoyable.
Yeah. How do you feel about Matt Sharp and?
Oh yeah. It's yeah, right. It's a tricky topic. I mean, it sucks, right? Like I literally was like at the finish line, watching him like cross the line. Like the ref like walked up to him like right when he finished. So I was like, damn. It's like 50-50, right? Like I personally know the rule, like not to do that because they say it in the pro meeting or whatever. So. But I also know like that's a stupid rule, right? Like don't disqualify the guy. Like that's kind of the problem, right? Like it is breaking the rule, but it's like the punishment seems like way overbearing for the crime, So maybe he should have just been docked a few minutes or a place. Or I mean, personally, he just should have been fine. Just let the guy finish in third, right? Who cares? But I don't know. It's the rules, right? So we'll see if it ends up changing. So.
Yeah. And then, are you thinking about doing 70.3 Worlds, or where are you at there?
Yeah. I don't even know. Like, I'm running in a pretty good form now. So it would be nice to try to go do Worlds. Obviously, I dropped out last year due to like hypothermia or whatever. So it'd be nice to try to go race on like the world stage again. I think I could do pretty well and be pretty competitive and just see like where I stack up against some of those guys. But it's obviously a really logistically hard place to get to. It's expensive. So I don't know. My name's on the list. I got to get through Friday and then maybe I'll go. But yeah, it kind of just seems a little hard to get to. So we'll see.
Yeah. And then last question. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, like, what made you decide to do 3 races in 12 days?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, just looking at the calendar, right? Like, I just like to race, so it was race opportunity. So I just signed up and I just did it. I just didn't really think much of it. I mean, everyone just watched the tour, right? They just did like 21 races in like 23 days, right? So it's like nothing, relatively speaking. So, yeah, to be honest, I didn't really think much of it. Just I would do a really big hard workout every weekend anyway, so might as well get race experience and get paid doing it. So, I mean, I'm pretty tired now, so yeah. We'll see if I can like string it together on Friday. Hopefully the legs show up. But yeah, I mean, like who cares, right? Like I like racing, so I'm just gonna race.
Cool.
So.
And then, if you don't do Worlds, what's next up for you?
Yeah. If I don't do Worlds, it's a pretty big gap in the calendar. I know there's like Ironman Canada, there's like Xterra National Champs. Like, I don't think I want to do an Ironman right now. I could do Xterra. It's like in Colorado, so it's like way easier to get to, so that might be fun. But then again, I might just like I really need to work on my swim. Again, like I said in the previous video, I've been working with front pack swim a lot to try to get better in the swim, because that's just, I'm not very good at it. I mean, it's going to be exposed really like at a grand scale on Friday with some of the best swimmers in the sport. I mean, I could be pretty far down, which sucks, you know. So I think maybe just taking the next 2 months and just trying to get some good swim training done, and then maybe pick back up with Michigan, Augusta, late September. And then I think there's like no races in October, so it's more training, and then get ready for just like the end of the season, like Los Cabos and Indian Wells 70.3 is what I think. So, and then call it a year and just try to get ready for some of the bigger PTO races next year. I know they're hopefully gonna have like 4 or 5 races, so try to do all of those. But obviously, if I want to do all of those, I need to be able to swim at a pretty high level. So,
And then for this week, we got this video coming out today, Tuesday, and then daily videos going all the way into Friday.
Yeah. So that should be pretty fun. Kind of like this vlog style videos, just chilling, just kind of like what the small details are leading up into the race, and we're just having a good time, showing the journey, and yeah, just trying to have a good time and trying not to get last place on Friday. So should be good. And then I know hopefully Cyrus is going to try to make a pretty good race recap video documenting Milwaukee that'll come out sometime next week, so that should be pretty cool. And yeah, just trying to inspire some other people, and yeah, finish off this race block hopefully on a somewhat decent note.